Video does as well. Thank you. Okay, so tonight we're going to be continuing in the book of Revelation, and we're in Revelation 14, if you were unsure. Let's see. And we're going to look at, it's just one verse tonight, verse 8. And I'll read it out to you. And there followed another angel, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. So this is the second angel. Remember I said the three angels. We looked last week at the angel in verse 6 who preached the everlasting gospel. And this week we're looking at the second angel saying Babylon has fallen, that great city. So let's say you just read that, you just kind of picked up Revelation and you just started to read, and you read that Babylon is fallen. Well, the Bible talks quite a lot about Babylon. So let's say you took a literal interpretation of these words and you're like, all right, so it's about Babylon. So Babylon is, you read about Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, they're kings of Babylon. There's the Babylonian Empire, and Babylon was an ancient city. It's sort of, I think it's where present day Iraq is, and it was conquered both by the Persians and by the Muslims. And we read about it in the book of Daniel, as I was saying, but what's interesting is that the end of the reign, if you like, of the kingdom of Babylon happens in 539 BC, according to most sources. So it's like, well, why have we suddenly started talking about Babylon? So let's have a look anyway at the mention of Babylon in Daniel chapter 5. So let's look at that first. Daniel, just after Ezekiel. And if we look at Daniel 5, so we have this strange kind of occurrence where the king of Babylon is sort of toasting his own gods with the sort of the drinking vessels that were taken out of the temple, right, and in Jerusalem, and he's kind of toasting his sort of idols, and a big hand appears, and this is kind of let's see. Yes. So this big kind of hand appears and starts to sort of write a message, and this is the message. And I'm not sure how good my pronunciation will be here, but in verse 25 it says, and this is the writing that was written: Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. And this is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, meaning God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balance and found wanting, and Perez, Thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. So it's literally God is saying to the king of Babylon, right, that's it, your kingdom is now finished, I'm going to give your kingdom to somebody else, like that's it. And that's exactly what happens. The Medes and the Persians come in and they kill the king, and it's like that's it. It's now they've taken over the kingdom. But it seems to me that, like, if this is literally Babylon that Revelation is talking about, it seems to be in totally the wrong time period, you know. So what if in Revelation Babylon is not literal, but is kind of figurative, it's symbolic of something else? And that to me makes more sense, it fits more. So the Babylonians were a people who were proud, you know, not in a good sense, sort of haughty, arrogant. They were caught up in idolatry, and they've been weighed in the balance, found wanting, and that empire God is going to judge. So if we take those ideas and transfer it to what we've been looking at, which is the Roman Catholic Church, does that fit? You know, could it be a kind of spiritual Babylon? Well, John Wesley thinks it is. He says, what Babylon was to Israel of old, Rome has been both to the literal and spiritual Israel of God. So he's drawing a parallel. He's saying just like Babylon was in ancient times, in the same kind of way, the Roman Catholic Church has been to Christians. It's been the same kind of thing. In other words, symbolically, the oppression and the persecution of the ancient Jewish people by Babylon is comparable to the oppression and persecution of genuine Christians by the Church of Rome. You can draw a parallel to that. And just as the liberty of the ancient Jews was associated with the overthrow of Babylon, so the liberty of genuine Christians at this time is associated with the overthrow of the power of Rome. And I think that's very interesting, if that's the case. I believe it is. That there is this sort of parallel we can draw. So in that case, that great city, to quote what it's saying here in Revelation, is actually Rome, and Babylon is just another name for the Roman Catholic Church. And that will make more sense as well when we start to kind of delve deeper on, go into the next few chapters. It will make more sense. So it talked about she, and here Rome, or the Roman Catholic Church, is called she. It says that she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. So we'll just kind of look at that just carefully, because all of those words are really important here. So Rome's fornication is her idolatry, because when something is put in place of God and worshipped as God, the Bible views that as spiritual fornication, or if you like, unfaithfulness, like a wife being unfaithful to her husband. Because all the way through the New Testament, the church, the genuine church, is the bride of Christ. So this is why I think the Bible uses this idea when it talks about God's people and God, or the church and Christ. It uses this idea of like a marriage, you know, like the church is the bride, and Christ is the groom, is the husband. And so you can see this language throughout, and this sort of imagery throughout the Bible. So if we go to Jeremiah, for example, in the Old Testament, which is just kind of a little bit before Daniel, before Ezekiel. You go to Jeremiah 3, you'll see what I mean. So Jeremiah 3 and verse 6. Says, the Lord said also unto me in the days of Josiah the king, hast thou seen that which backsliding Israel hath done? She has gone up upon every high mountain and under every green tree, and there hath played the harlot. And I said, after she had done all these things, turn thou unto me. But she returned not, and her treacherous sister Judah saw it. And I saw, when for all the causes whereby backsliding is Israel committed adultery. You see the kind of language it's using, like a husband and wife. When Israel had committed adultery, I had put her away and given her a bill of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah feared not, but went and played the harlot also. So it's kind of personification, isn't it? It is a poetic term, that Israel and Judah are being compared to as if they're sisters, and Israel is being unfaithful, like a wife is unfaithful, like an unfaithful wife would be to a husband. And this idea of on the top of the mountains, under the green trees, we know from history that this is where Israel built shrines to idols other than to God, or sometimes even mixed the worship of the true God with the worship of idols. And what God is saying in Jeremiah there and in other places is adultery. It's spiritual adultery. It's spiritual fornication, and God views it as that. As God views it as Israel being unfaithful, committing idolatry, worshipping other gods. Again, that it's also in the New Testament, this idea that the church, God's believers, his disciples, are in relationship with him, just like a wife is in relationship with her husband. So again, when James accuses Christians of friendship with the world, that is of putting the things of the world in place of God and loving them instead of loving God, he says adulterers and adulteresses. So he's using that idea. He's saying, oh, you're committing adultery. You're committing spiritual adultery. He says, no, you're not. That friendship of the world is enmity with God. So you become an enemy of God by putting the things of the world in place of God. So what is Rome's fornication? Well, it is her invocation of saints and angels, her worship of images, as we've already seen, the attributing to the Pope of those titles that are only suitable for Christ or for God. And I'll say it again, I've said it probably every week. No, I don't hate Roman Catholics. No, I don't wish them harm. But this is the traditional, historic Protestant position. So in just to kind of expand on this a little bit, in 2 John, that is John's second epistle, he says, for many deceivers are entered into the world. That is true. But he goes on to say, this is a deceiver and an antichrist. He says, look to yourselves that we lose not those things which we have wrought or that we've worked for, but that we receive a full reward. Whosoever transgresseth and abideth not in the doctrine of Christ hath not God. So what he's saying is, there are people who go out into the world and it's their mission to deceive Christians. And that, just because you say you're a church or you say you worship Jesus. This is not the test. We've just been talking about the Mormons. They say, well, we're the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But it's like, just because you've got Jesus Christ in the title of your church, this doesn't make you a church. It doesn't mean you represent Christ. The test is, does this church abide and remain in the teachings of Christ? That's what John was saying. It's like, if you don't remain, to abide is to remain. If you don't remain in the teachings of Christ, you don't teach what Christ taught and what his apostles taught, then whatever you call yourself, you're not a Christian church. Because a Christian church represents Christ and what he taught and said, and what he embodied and his example and so on. So this is the test. Does the church abide? Does it remain in the teachings of Christ? Does it teach what Jesus and his apostles taught? And I put it to you that the Roman Catholic Church did not and does not today. There's a lot of things that have been added that Jesus never taught and that the apostles never taught. Now, the Roman Catholic Church is not unique in that. That's what the JWs do, that's what the Mormons do, that's what lots of different movements do. But the point is this, and why this is so significant, is that the Roman Catholic Church was the first church to really significantly depart from the scriptures and to have the power and the sort of the spiritual power and the worldly dominance. They dominated the world at this time, and that's what makes it different. It's just their power and their domination of the world, where if you lived in Europe, that was probably only the only church you're really seeing, apart from a few pockets of genuine believers, and that's what makes this so significant. So, as I've said, whilst it might sound emotive, a church that does this, that departs from the scriptures and that teaches different things from Christ, is, as John says, a deceiver and an antichrist. So you're deceiving people, you're not teaching the truth, and the word antichrist means not just the one who is against Christ, but the one who replaces Christ. And again, I put it to you that the Pope in the Roman Catholic mindset and doctrine is replacing Christ as the head of the church. Only Christ is the head of the church. But as I say, it sounds kind of emotive and perhaps a little bit insulting, but it is the Protestant view. Any church that is going to do things like compromise the unique redemption that comes through Christ has to be called out. We have to call it out and say that's error, that's deception. So again, another big clue for me, or a verse that fits, let's say, with what we're saying, comes at the end of verse 8 there, where it says, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. So this image is of, it says she, it's sort of image of a woman who is as a seducer, making the nations drunk with wine. This idea is like trying to get the person drunk for in order to commit fornication. That's really what the image is doing, and it's probably as well a back reference to Jeremiah 51 verse 7, which says, Babylon hath been a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine, therefore the nations are mad. So this idea of drunkenness and insanity, you'll find it in Proverbs as well. You know, idea that like you drink this wine and you lose sense of reason, and also that there's a certain kind of, you know, idea of letting go of restraint and, you know, wantonness and so on. And so this imagery is really interesting. You know, it's kind of playing with that imagery of the seducer, the harlot, the one who's trying to get men to kind of lose their control, and she's seducing them, she's giving them this wine, she's making them drunk. But this idea is now transferred to Babylon, the Roman Catholic Church, and it's now a sort of spiritual thing. It's not literal, it's like spiritually these are intoxicating doctrines, you know, and that the people who are believing these doctrines, just like if they're drinking wine, it's like if you're taking in this teaching, this doctrine, you'll go mad with it. You know, it's like you'll lose reason, you'll lose your sense. So it's just, yeah, this drunkenness is connected to a kind of madness, really. And I think that is really true, because I think there are teachings and doctrines that are demonic, let's put it that way. And it's not just in the Roman Catholic Church, you know, it's in other organisations and cults, and you know, some of the teaching is quite disturbing from some of these cults and sort of Christianized cults, and again in charismatic circles where it's extreme charismatic teaching. If you've ever seen these videos of extreme charismatic churches where they're writhing on the floor, and there's even a thing, isn't there, like amongst charismatic churches where they sort of say, oh well, when the Holy Spirit comes, it's like being drunk. No, it's not. You know, there is reasoning behind it, but it's very faulty reasoning. And so, you know, I mean, I've not even thought of that, but it's sort of like, yeah, you're drunk on this wine that is false doctrine. You know, you're acting like mad people, you know. So just to kind of finish off then, and to sum this verse up, which is, of course, this is the second statement that we hear. The first one being the first angel, the everlasting gospel. This is the second angel making this proclamation. Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink the wine of the wrath of her fornication. To sum that up, Babylon is the Church of Rome here. The Church of Rome has seduced the nations into madness of unbiblical idolatry and unbiblical doctrines, and as a consequence, those nations and that church will now be exposed to the wrath of God. It's like that's the penalty, that's the punishment. It's because you led those nations astray, you led them away from the scriptures, so now God is going to bring punishment to you for doing that. And I really do believe that any church or any teacher who leads people away from the truth of God's word, God will punish severely for that. But you've got to be, as a Christian, you've got to be discerning. You know, I've said this before, don't just go on YouTube and go, oh, that looks interesting, now watch this. Be discerning, be careful who you allow to teach you, because it is a privilege to teach somebody, you know, and therefore be picky, be choosy.
The remedy is reading it yourself.
Yep, that's how you can judge, that's how you discern. Is this true? Is this right? And there is, like, you know, there are some things you're like, no, I'm not sure. But the more you study this book, the more you read it, the more clearly you'll be able to see, right, this is, no, this doesn't work, this is not right. You know, you get, as they used to say, a check in your spirit. It doesn't feel right. And that's when you kind of, you know, whatever anybody teaches, test it. Test it against the scriptures. Is it, you know, does it fit? Is it consistent with what everything else they're teaching? So yeah, it's always this book. It's always, you know, use this, get to know it, know how to divide it, you know, like a good workman, show yourself approved to God, and then that will protect you from false teachers.